And welcome to the Planning Committee again on the 1st of December. The first item on the agenda then is apologies for absence.
Well, apologies from Councillor Paulette Smith, Chairman.
Paulette, okay. No others, nothing coming up, no. Okay. Item 2 then is, are there any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests?
Yeah, Chair,
yeah.
If it's Wayne Harris from Yellow Cabs, I know him.
On the Clontine Street?
Item 2, yeah.
Yeah. Pass, you're trying to find out
Okay.
whether we can get any legal advice on that.
Yeah. Hello, Chair. Afternoon. Yeah, Councillor Anderson. Yes, if you've got a personal relationship, then it's a personal interest, unless you think that your relationship is such that it prejudices your interest when it comes to deciding on the application. So then you would have a prejudicial interest.
Yeah.
If it's just a personal interest, then
I only know him as being an ex-taxi driver myself. That's the only reason I do know him. Yeah. But other than that, I haven't seen him for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Just be a personal interest then, so that as declared.
I don't have to leave the room, do I?
No, not for a personal interest.
What we don't know, Jonathan, is it the same Wayne Harris? We can't find out. So we tried to find out, but we can't. We don't know.
I don't. Okay.
So,
well, Councillor, happy to declare a personal interest. Then he can still vote and take part in the debate if he wants to be on the safe side.
That's fair. Yeah, that's wise. Yeah. Okay. No.
Thank you.
No others? No. All right then. Item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting as the correct record. If we turn to page 1, that's on 3rd of November. Page 2, and finally page 3. Does that be moved on as a true record, please? Yep.
That's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Item 4, are there any items for deferral or withdrawal? No, Chair. None? Thank you. Okay then, on to item 5 is the provisional tree order preservation at Llanmawr, and I think that's... Oh, sorry, yes please, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report in respect of a provisional tree preservation order that was served in March 2020, and essentially is a report that has to consider confirmation as a full order of the provisional tree preservation order. The update sheet has been circulated to members, and we will note that in respect of this application, there's further observations from one of the objectors to the tree preservation order, also including some photographs to accompany those comments. If members have seen it, I won't display the photographs, but if anyone needs me to display them, I could certainly put them on the screen for members, but they have been circulated previously. In terms of the comments, in terms of notification, the notification on this issue is exactly the same as every other planning application. There's no shorter period. It's exactly as we would do on any notification that comes before committee to objectors. Your officer recommendation is the issue be considered today, but obviously it's a decision for committee. The objector wishes to address committee, but he has provided written observations for members' consideration. In terms of the application, the confirmation of the order, it's all detailed in the report. Alan Webb studies is part of the meeting, so if members have specific queries, Alan is here to answer them. But the recommendation as set out in the report is that the tree preservation order be confirmed.
Thank you, Ian. That's at, should I say, Llanmawr Close. Any member wish to speak? Does anybody want to move stuff? Yeah, we've got that.
Yes, Chair, can I ask a question of Alan, please?
Yeah.
Alan, in your opinion, does the trees need lopping in their current state?
One of them has been very recently. I don't think it needed it. It was purely for aesthetics. I have been contacted by the other objector today, funny enough, asking can he lock the tree, and this can be done through an application in the normal way if the order's approved for confirmation today. But there's, from what I've seen and what they've said and what that gentleman has said, it's not required for safety.
I see. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because we're very, very concerned on every TPO order at the moment because of what's happened recently in another part of Swansea. So we are trying to retain trees. That's council policy, as you know. And I just wanted to clarify that there wasn't, in your opinion, any danger to anyone because of the current state of the trees.
The last time I saw the trees, there was nothing significantly wrong with them. You know, they all had minor defects, but nothing significant. The tree preservation order legislation allows for work to be done immediately or at very short notice if there is a problem. So the TPO shouldn't be restrictive in that respect.
Thank you for your clarification.
Chairman.
Councillor White.
Councillor.
Oh, sorry. White's up. Hand up first, Bill, and then Councillor White first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Seeing obviously the follow-up sheet you had this morning, the gentleman obviously asked to be given the opportunity to come and speak to us personally. Do you think? I just wondering whether this would be acceptable, so that we are fair with the gentleman.
Yeah, I will be putting that to the committee in a minute, Councillor Evans.
Just a quick.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't sure whether it was the appropriate time to be asking Alan questions. Is he going to summarise the plan and application for us first before questions, or is it now question time to Alan, the tree preservation officer?
Well, if Alan's happy to take that, yeah.
Well, we don't usually have questions ad lib, do we? I mean, let's have the presentation first and then questions. Is that right?
We've had that presentation, Councillor.
Yeah. Just to clarify, Councillor, this is an application to confirm the order. It's not an application for planning permission or for works to the tree. It's an application to confirm the tree preservation order can be placed on the 2 trees subject to the report. That's fine. Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, unless anyone else wishes to speak, that request has been made to defer the report. What is the members' wishes first on that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you then, Paul.
One of the objectors has asked that we defer the meeting until he is able to be here to represent himself and make his presentation. But that's up to the Councillor Jones first.
It is difficult because this has been advertised and they were asked for comments and we've had objections, and I think if it's the same person, we've all had an email saying he's a frontline worker and obviously couldn't take part today, and I think in fairness maybe we will in this instance have to defer it so he does have the opportunity, because as he said, he needs 2 weeks before to get a date that he can have the time off. And I think in the current circumstances, I think maybe we should defer it. So I would move that.
All right, just come back to that then. Councillor Black?
Can we have some legal advice on this issue? Is there a danger if we don't defer it that we could be causing problems for ourselves?
Yeah, we'll come to that then. Okay, Councillor Des Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. Just on a point of order, really, item 4 was items for deferral withdrawal, and we didn't move anything at that stage.
We'll get Jonathan's advice on that. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. In answer to Councillor Black's query, Members aren't obliged to defer this matter now. The provisional TPO was put on in March, so the objectors have had until then to make any representations in respect of the TPO. And I can say there has been case law on a similar point to this, where members were only received a summary of a TPO, and that was found in court to be sufficient for them to be able to make a decision on the TPO rather than hearing direct evidence from objectors. They could just have a summary of the facts and objections and make a decision on the information then that was in front of them. So I hope that's it, Chair.
That clarifies that. Thank you. We've got Councillor Richard Lewis and Alan wants to come back.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think what is important is that with the situation we've got at the moment, with a lot of staff working from home, etc., the difficulty of getting information, I think Mary Jones is absolutely right to ask for it to be deferred. I think so. At the end of the day, I look at the mess that the planners made on the estate in Penrith and some of the decisions there to put trees in and have tree preservations order. Luckily, it did come to committee. And it was rejected by the committee, and I think this is what is all important. You know, we are still meant to be a democratic society, and I think maybe, and of course, it's a pleasant change to see on the agenda that you can have an item for withdrawal. Now, for a long time, that was dropped off our of the minutes for a long time, but I think it is very important, especially with trees these days. And if somebody is, it doesn't matter what job they've got, everybody's entitled to have a democratic say on something that will affect their life or their style of living. And I think this is important. And to be honest with you, I think it should be deferred.
Okay, I'll come back, Alan. Alan, you had your hand still up?
Just so the committee's fully aware, I took pains to fully reproduce the objection from the objector and not just summarise it as I usually do. So, you know, to ensure that all his words were considered, I've included all of it.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
Yeah. Just to clarify, in terms of notification for future committees, the objector said that they need 2 weeks notification. We're unable to give 2 weeks notification. The agenda isn't produced that far in advance to be able to do that. In terms of the procedure, if the tree preservation order was confirmed, should any work be required to that tree, there's nothing to stop anyone making an application for those works to be undertaken. So the provision of the TPO will protect the tree, but it doesn't preclude any applications for necessary works. As officers, we consider there's enough information before you to make a decision today. The representations from the objector have been produced in full. Also, the additional comments are on the update sheet. Clearly, it's committee's decision, but as officers, we don't consider there is a need to defer, but that is a matter for committee.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Jonathan, your hand is still up there. Did you want to come back? No. No? Okay. All right, then, well, somebody has moved and it's been seconded that the item is deferred. We're going to have to take a vote on that now then.
Yeah, if I call your names out as usual, so we are voting now to defer the application. Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Against.
Peter Black.
For deferral.
Will Evans.
Against.
Mary Jones.
For deferral.
Mike Lewis.
For deferral.
Richard Lewis.
For deferral, Chairman.
Christine Richards.
For deferral, Chair.
Des Thomas.
Against.
Linda Tyler Lloyd. Councillor Tyler Lloyd. No. Mike White.
For deferral.
And Councillor Paul Lloyd.
I'm against.
This is 6 to 4. For deferred.
Yeah, okay, well that is carried, it is deferred. Okay, thank you. Next item then is item 6 on our agenda is, you find on page 37, that's the application for Tontine Street. That's Liam's.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this planning application proposes demolition of an existing commercial warehouse building along Tontine Street in the city centre. Proposes redevelopment of the site to comprise of a new 4-storey building accommodating 21 self-contained flats. The items on the agenda today as it constitutes a major development and it meets the council's constitution threshold. So there's one small addition to the report. It's contained in your update sheet. It's merely a matter of clarification really in terms of policy surrounding affordable housing. Particularly why affordable housing hasn't been a requirement for this particular development. So it's just to clarify that really. In terms of location, you've got the site plan there in front of you with the red line. So you can see the location of the building sort of along Tontine Street. You've got High Street running through the centre point there, and then the railway station to your bottom right corner. So it's about 100 metres from the train station. Connects then into Davati Street to the west. As you can just see the context there. There's a couple of listed buildings, churches. There's one directly opposite Ebenezer Baptist Church there, and another church, and the grounds of the church, the graveyard just behind the building. So that's the context there. If we go on to the next slide then. So you can just make out the building there towards the top left off Tontine Street. You've got a couple of residential blocks either side, and then you've got frontage to the back end of the church there, and then some more commercial units to the left hand side to the west. So it's quite a narrow road. If you see from the next photos, so you can see Tontine Street there. So there's some traffic restrictions there on the road. The application building is that sort of metal clad one with some brick on the side. It's not the most attractive building, as you'll see from the next couple of slides. So that's one of the residential blocks to the right hand side, and then the subject building is the one with the white van parked outside. If we scroll on through, so yeah, just a context there to show the general appearance of the area. And that's the building. So you can see it sort of spans the whole site up to the pavement. And then we'll just see the other aspect then. So that's sort of to the left hand side of the building. And I think there's another photo as well. Yeah, so that just shows the side elevation of that building, the brick. And then you've got a bit of land behind. So in terms of the proposal, the building, it would span across 4 different stories. So your ground floor, first floor, second floor and third floor. The third floor will be inset. In terms of material detailing, you'll see on the plans the majority is brickwork with some stone sills and some composite cladding and metal standing seam cladding across as well. Windows, they're proposed to be grey aluminium, and the street facing elevation, so the elevation at the top left there has a sort of central glazed band which runs through the centre spine of the building. That's your sort of your stairwell, your access, communal access with a lift shaft there in it. In terms of other features there on the frontage, you've got balconies. They were introduced during the scheme just to sort of enliven the frontage. And you've got a bit of variation there. I mentioned the setback at third floor level. You can't see it obviously on that plan, but they've also added a green roof to the proposal as part of the scheme as well. So if we go on to the next slide, just shows the context there in terms of siting, and it's got the ground floor layout plotted on. On the ground floor, there'd be 5 flats, 6 on the first floor, 6 on the second floor, and then 4 on the third floor. The rear ground floor units, they have access to like a small sort of external area, a bit of land at the back, then you've got the graveyard then beyond that. Internally, you've got, so to the right-hand side of the floor area there, you've got a bicycle storage area and refuse storage. So it's dedicated in the building with a separate side access. And then to go on to the next slide, it just shows so that's the upper floor. Then you've got some balcony areas for the flats. And then the next slide then just should show the context, so the scale of the building. So when you compare it against the nearest buildings either side, so it just shows the height to be no more than what's there existing. So those are the visuals. I mean, in terms of the key considerations as set out in your report, really, you've got the principle of development, visual impact, heritage, residential amenity impact, highway safety, ecology and drainage. As mentioned, really, the site lies adjacent to the high street within the city centre action area. There's a real objective to reinforce and improve the city centre. There's a vibrant focus really for business, administration, shopping, culture and leisure, to get more people living in the city centre as well. So the site adjoins Site J, which is allocated for a range of regeneration projects. It's adjacent to the Swansea Central Area Regeneration Framework, or the SCARF area as you'll know it. The High Street area is identified as a complementary area for living, working and learning. And as we've seen from developments coming forward, it's actively changing, developing. We've seen a positive shift there, particularly in terms of new developments coming forward. So in terms of principle, it will result in the removal of a commercial unit. The building itself is of no particular value there. So it'll look to revitalise, improve the aesthetics of the site and provide good quality residential accommodation. So on that basis, principle is considered to be acceptable. In terms of visual impact, it reacts positively to the street scene. It is, as I mentioned, lower in terms of profile than the adjoining buildings. It's got that contemporary feel about it, being a modern structure. We'd reserve, as usual, on these developments full finishes by condition. But as mentioned, it's mainly brick and some clad in there. So there's no render really taking the predominant form. As mentioned, it's close to some listed buildings, the churches, but the form and design doesn't really harm their setting and complements them in essence. In terms of amenity, it's set out in your report. Obviously, being in a city centre location, residents will be exposed to higher levels of ambient noise, late night uses, for example, and there's obviously proximity to commercial premises, so that has to be taken into account. But obviously, residents living in a city centre location won't expect the same level of peace and quiet as perhaps residents who live wholly in a residential area outside of the city. So there's been no objections from a pollution control team in that respect. Officers have considered the layout of each flat and it complies with our standards in terms of providing acceptable living and there's appropriate outlook from the flats, and as mentioned, there's spaces for refuse and cycling as well, for storage of bicycles. So next consideration then, you'll see in your report highway safety. So as you'll be aware, Planning Policy Wales, it seeks to encourage public transport, walking and cycling. It aims to reduce the need to travel by car effectively. And the SCARF document seeks to promote sustainable transport, reduce car dependency and relax car parking standards where appropriate, where there's no adverse effect on highway conditions. So in this instance, the parking standards SPG would require 1 parking space per residential unit, and this clearly can't be accommodated on the site. As a result, the Highway Authority has objected to the application on the basis of a lack of on-site car parking space. So whilst, as you see in the report, really, those concerns are noted, the thrust of land use planning policy, particularly in city centre and edge of city centre sites, is to shift that mode of transport, is to improve opportunities for people to walk and cycle within the city centre. So encouraging parking spaces on the site, it would encourage more vehicles to come into the city centre, which ultimately isn't sustainable. Taking into account as well, this is a scheme for 21 units. It's not a substantial residential development where you'd expect people to own and bring a car to the site. So that's obviously the consideration there. So acknowledging the lack of parking as well as potential viability of the scheme, which I understand this scheme is hinged on funding, the applicant has agreed to commit to Section 106 agreement to provide for financial contribution as set out in your report. That would be used to fund highway safety enhancements at the junction with High Street. So this, given that there would be more pedestrian flow to and from the site, it would be reasonable and can be argued is necessary to make the development acceptable to offset the lack of parking. And arguably it will lead to betterment over the existing site situation, which Highways have obviously identified in their consultation response. So on balance of the issues, we consider and taking into account the fact there's a commercial use of the building that could and can be used currently. So taking that into account, we consider despite there being a lack of parking, the application is acceptable on this merit. So other considerations they're set out in your report as well, drainage and ecology matters, but ultimately it ticks the box in terms of principle of developments on a brownfield site, introducing much needed housing to the area, accessible, sustainable, and there'll be no visual impact or harm in that respect, and subject to conditions and the 106 officers feel it's acceptable. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right. Any members wish to speak? Anyone? Councillor Mary Jones.
Thank you, Jay. It's only a very quick question. When I looked at the floor plans, I take it they're all one-bedroom flats. It doesn't say anywhere that I can find in the report. I just wondered if that is the case. Why are they all one-bedroom and why aren't there some two-bedrooms?
Do we come back to that first and then we can, yeah, is that all right? Councillor Des Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. It's one of the historical parts of Swansea, obviously. And I note that there is an archaeological survey to be carried out. What happens to the records of that study or findings? Does it ever come back to the planning department? I think it would be interesting for members to know if anything's found. It's very close to the area where Richard used to sell his balloons and party hats, of course. I even noticed the Hedgehogs have their own web page, www.hedgehogstreet.org. Interesting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My concern is around the parking. I've got no objection in principle with development. In fact, it's a massive improvement on what's there already, though the flats next to it are hardly an architectural gem. But I've just the issue about parking does concern me. From my understanding, looking at the application, of there are no parking spaces at all attached to these flats. Is that correct? Because if that's the case, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that 21 people in one-bedroom flats would not own a car between them, and actually it is very difficult to get long-term parking in that area at all. It just seems to me that that's going to cause problems in the future. So I'm just interested in how exactly that is going to be reconciled. I understood what the officer said, that that it's a city centre location, there's sustainable transport, etc., etc. But people don't always live like that, do they?
Okay. Councillor Mike Lewis.
Yes, parking aside, I tend to disagree with Councillor Black on the parking because just across the road, we've recently passed a student block which had very limited parking, and there'd be, I think, was 600-700 students going to be staying there. But this this application, in my view, fits very well with the ongoing council strategy of increasing footfall within the city centre, thus increasing local business success. And it reinforces the concept of living and working centrally within in the city, and I think anyone who wants to move into a flat there will know that there's no parking there, and it's a decision whether to take the flat there or not. So personally, I'm quite taken with this application, and I will be voting for it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a question really to the Highways Office in regards to the 106. Seeing obviously the entrances are coming in off High Street there, and it's quite narrow there. I've often seen an articulated lorry trying to manoeuvre to get in around there because it's quite narrow. Is the 8K or the 106 actually enough to implement the measures that's needed there?
Okay, we'll get to that answer shortly. Councillor Richard Lewis.
Well, Chairman, I was very grateful for Des reminding me that I did have Catoy's Cash and Carry on the site now, and we had a very nice car park behind, and it was very useful. But now that, and of course the council has done rather well on it, having gone up to 18 and 19 stories, and it's with very limited parking there. If I'm not mistaken, I think Des, first of all, when he in his career with Swansea City, he represented this area.
That's right.
Am I right?
Yes, you're
right.
right.
Memory's not going, you see, Des.
Yeah.
Anyway, I agree with Peter. I think it was Peter Black said about having parking there. I think he's absolutely right. There should be some parking, because I think that if you get 20 people living there, 1 or 2 are bound to have a car, even for work. And I think that to say because it's city centre, when you look at the city centre with a parking benefit, we have reduced to a very dangerous level. When I was first elected at the same time as Des, we had about 17 or 18,000 car parking spaces. And that's where it was all happening. It made a huge difference. Now we've got less than 3, and it's going down all the time, because we've just lost where Catoy's was and the Espresso Cafe. They've got it all gone there, and it must have been a slight windfall for the City Council on that one. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, I've got a few hands are still up. Are they wishing to come back? I've got Councillor Thomas and Councillor Black's hands are still up. Are they?
Sorry, take them down. No, sorry.
Okay, Councillor Black. You're muted, mate. Yes,
I know. Sorry. Yeah, I just want to come back in terms of what Mike Lewis says. I mean, I totally accept his point about the need for developments in the city, bringing footfall into the city centre, and I'm prepared to accept the planning officer's view on the parking issue. But we've always been made clear to us that the student accommodation is a different kettle of fish to standard accommodation, because students are not expected to have cars. They're there for the short term, and tenancy agreements can be built into their tenancy to say they shouldn't have cars if they're going to take up that tenancy. And by all means, you know, if they want to market these flats with no parking spaces, that's their lookout. They may or may not get people taking up that. But I just feel that we are in a situation where parking is at massive premium around that area. At best, you can park for an hour at a time if you can get a space. I mean, I'm sure they might want to rent some spaces off us in High Street car multi-story, because we can't seem to fill that one. But I do think that parking needs to be taken into account as part of this. I just want to make that clear. Thank you, Chair.
Well, that's fair. Okay, thank you. So unless anyone else wishes to speak, perhaps we can ask Liam and Highways for.
Yeah, I'll come back on those questions. I mean, Councillor Mary Jones, you asked about 1 and 2 bed flats. Well, the scheme does propose 2 bed flats. It wasn't on the presentation because I didn't show the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor has 4 2-bedroom flats. So the other properties are, so the majority is 1 bed, but then there are 2 bedrooms mixed in with that. Councillor Thomas, query about archaeology. Well, Ordinarily, that would be reserved for planning condition, and I think it's condition 7 in the report. So what they would have to do is submit details to us, and then it's at that stage we'd have sight of those details if investigation did bring anything up. So that's when we would be able to see that effectively.
It would be interesting for feedback.
Yeah,
If something interesting does arise.
Councillor Black then and Councillor White, in terms of parking, and Councillor Lewis, really, I mean, yes, I think you accept there's no car parking on this scheme, but then you've got residential blocks. I'm just looking on the mapping system now adjacent off High Street, and I can't see any parking for those residential units. I mean, it much is the nature of the makeup of a city centre, as if you're buying a flat, then you're buying it in full knowledge you haven't got a parking bay. And I think that's the whole thrust of land use planning in Wales, is to try and stop people needing to travel by car. And I think if you design that out at an early stage, then you're not going to have city centres full of cars, which is obviously a sustainability issue, isn't it? And looking at improving walkable, having sites which are close to the shops, close to your everyday needs, really. So is there a need to actually have a car? So that's really the question we have to look at. And yes, we have to grapple with the balance of is there enough parking to serve the development? I think in this instance, the majority are one-bedroom flats, as I just pointed out, and if parking was to be provided, would that be an issue in terms of the scheme anyway, in terms of detriment to the street scene, for example? And they probably wouldn't be able to get a building of that scale on there. So there are other issues there to contend with. But in terms of balancing everything up, I think we feel it is acceptable on this merit, despite there being that lack of parking. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Lee. Matthew, did you have anything to answer there?
Yeah, I mean, the site is arguably sustainable. It's very close to the railway station, very close to high frequency bus routes. And I suppose, I mean, were it 2 streets to the south, it would be within the core area, so there'd be no requirement for parking anyway. I mean, as it is, it isn't, and the Highway Authority's view is that there should be some parking. I mean, perhaps not be providing a space per dwelling or 2 spaces per dwelling, but we were of the opinion that there should be something. That given, single yellow lines on Tontine Street are covered by the City Centre 66 order, the Gateway order, which means that after 6 o'clock in the evening, you can park there until 8 o'clock in the morning, and that's Monday to Saturday. That applies, so you could park there on a Sunday. So they would have the opportunity for residents to stop outside if they needed to, outside of the daytime hours. Councillor White asked about the 106. The intention with the 106 was just to sort of tidy up the junction of Tontine Street and High Street, to sort of reconstruct the bell mouth to create more room for pedestrians to wait if they're crossing the road, because it's all a bit tight and a bit constricted on that corner, and there is sufficient 106 to carry that out.
Okay, yeah, right, thank you both. Can't see any other hands up, and so therefore we will shortly be moving to the vote, having heard everyone and asked all your questions and a very thorough presentation and answers. So we know, Gareth, take a vote, please.
The recommendation is 4. So
sorry, it is yes for approval.
Councillor Anderson.
Approve.
Peter Black.
Approve.
Will Evans.
Approve.
Mary Jones.
Approve.
Mike Lewis.
Approve.
Richard Lewis.
Against.
Christine Richards.
Approve.
Des Thomas.
Approve.
Linda Tyler Lloyd.
Approve.
Mike White.
Approve.
And Paul White.
I approve, yeah.
10 to 1.
That's carried. Thank you very much. And our next item then is the item 7 on page 62 is the LDP first annual monitoring report. Tom. No, is it Tom? Yes, Tom.
I am indeed.
Okay.
Do you want me to take it forward, Chair?
So, yes, when you're ready, please, Tom.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so this is for information report. I'm not going to do a presentation on this for members. This is really just to set out that we had published this document on the website now. It's the first opportunity really to produce an annual review of the plan for the first full year following its adoption. So it's April to March. And there is normally a statutory requirement to submit these every sort of around about October time to Welsh Government to show how the policies and the objectives of the plan are actually being delivered. Actually, this year it wasn't a requirement, and we didn't need to produce this or publish it because of the pandemic. And notwithstanding that, I mean, there haven't been any authorities that have elected to submit it to Welsh Government. But notwithstanding that, we've chosen to progress with the work because it's very valuable monitoring work to be doing to make sure that exactly what we're seeking to deliver through the development plan is actually coming to fruition, and that some of the targets that we've got are being met. So we carried on with that work, and it's pleasing to see that against all the monitoring targets that are set out in the monitoring framework within a section of the plan, that all of those targets have not been contravened then, and the indicators are showing that the plan is on target for meeting its objectives and its policy aspirations. So there's no the fundamentals of this report really is to say that there's no red flags there, and we will continue to monitor the plan into next year, and as and when we identify any issues, we can identify what needs to be done about it, really, in terms of whether the plan needs to be, any aspect of it needs to be reviewed, or whether any mitigating work needs to be done to make sure that our objectives are being met. But this work has shown we don't need to do that yet, and we're on course.
Indeed. Thank you, Tom, and thank you very much for the report. It makes good reading.
All 220 pages of it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Any member wish to speak or ask Tom any questions? No hands going up. Good. Thank you. Thank you all. That is for information. Yeah, and does make, as I say, good reading.
Yeah.
Right. No one else? No. Okay then. Well, thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Bye, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks all.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye bye.